So I will start that now. So I think everybody probably got a message about the recording. All right, so recording should be in progress. All right, so again, welcome everyone. And so as I mentioned, this is the first in a 4-part series. And I wanted to provide you a quick overview of the other 3 sessions that we encourage you to sign up for and attend if you have not already. And so I'll ask, and thank you, Jennifer and Leota, for putting the sign-in form. So if you have not signed in, please feel free to do so now. You can sign in and earn your miles for attending today's workshop. And then for my colleagues, we can put in links to our Teach website to make sure that if you have not signed in for the other 3 sessions, please feel free to do so after today's session as well. So today, again, we're going to be discussing just an overview of generative AI and the uses for you in the classroom. The second series, the second session, is called Getting Started with AI in Teaching and Learning, Research, Writing, and Critical Evaluation. So that session is really focused on how you can harness the power of AI to improve your productivity and challenge the critical thinking skills of your students. So this is really about, again, how we can help you as a faculty member when you're looking for how to create your syllabus, how to modify learning objectives, creating an email, drafting narratives, things like that. So it's really focused in on those aspects. Then session 3 is called Getting Started with AI in Teaching and Learning, Presentations and Visual Imagery. So this is focusing on the creative and innovative energy for the session, on using it for creating visual presentations and visual appealing artifacts. So that is, again, something that these new generative AI tools, which again, we'll be talking about today, what they can create, what some of those limitations are, and how you can use that in your courses. Session 4 is called Getting Started with AI in Teaching and Learning, and this is really focused on assessments. And this is something that, of course, we struggle with a lot when we're talking about even changing the assessments we currently have when it comes to academic integrity. This is the session for you. So this also talks about writing a good test can be a struggle. So how can we use AI to assist in that? How can we look at the types of questions we're asking? How can we modify those questions? How do we ensure that the students are learning what we expect of them? What are the different types of formats we can generate with the use of AI? So we, again, encourage you to, if you haven't already, signed up for those sessions. And thank you to Jen for putting that in the chat. So for those who just popped in, there is a sign-in link that I just put in again. So as people come in and out, I'll ask Jen and Leota to kind of repopulate the sign-in form. So if you have not signed in, please feel free to do so for today's session. All right.
So John, do we want to launch that poll?
Yes.
Okay.
So we are, thank you, Leota, for reminding. So we're going to launch a poll that asks you about your current comfort level with generative AI. So if you can answer that, we'll give you guys a few minutes to do so. We'll leave it up for just another minute. So Alan, I'll put this in the chat again. Okay.
It looks like everybody's finished responding, so I'm gonna end the poll.
Awesome.
John, would you like me to share the results?
Yeah, let's share the
or-
results.
Okay. So everybody can get a feel for where we're all at right now. Looks like a good spread.
Yeah, so again, this is also what we're seeing again when we talk through a lot of our students as well, is that there are some students who are very familiar, somewhat familiar, and then of course there's a handful of folks who are not very familiar, not at all familiar. And so this is something that we're so excited about to share in today's workshop. So as part of this, the university had partnered with the International Center for Academic Integrity in March and October of last year. So we initially worked with ICAI on a student survey related to academic integrity and how students came to understand the environment at UF in dealing with academic integrity, as well as their understanding and usage of AI in the classroom. So we then partnered with them again in October to send out the faculty survey. One of the interesting findings was that the majority of our faculty indicated that in the last 12 months, they did not observe students using artificial intelligence in the classroom. So as the survey was taken in October, we fully expect that if we ran the same survey in October of next year, this number is going to be completely flipped, right? So as AI is becoming more and more commonplace, and it's becoming more common for students and faculty to see this, especially again in social media, it's all over the news, it's in your Chronicle article, you're probably seeing it in your department meetings. This is something that I fully expect that these numbers will be flipped by next year. So I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Leota.
Good morning, everybody. We're just going to start by giving you a quick definition of generative AI to make sure we all have some common vocabulary to work with. Generative AI, what most people shorten to Gen AI, encompasses a group of machine learning algorithms designed to generate new data samples that mimic existing data sets. Basically, Gen AI models use advanced algorithms to learn patterns and generate a new content such as text, images, sounds, videos, code. Some good examples of Gen AI tools include ChatGPT, that's the one most people are familiar with. But we also have Google Bard, Stable Diffusion. DALL-E is what most people are familiar with when it comes to image generation. Circling back, ChatGPT, for example, has caused a huge interest in the use of Gen AI in higher education, actually across education in general, since it was released in November 2022. It is a controversial system that was developed by OpenAI. It's a large language model, has more than 175 billion parameters and has been pre-trained on large amounts of text data. It can generate human-like responses to a wide range of text-based inputs. And we're going to have an opportunity today to play just a little bit with different large language models, just to get a feel for them. I'm going to turn it back over to John.
So typically there are three types of generative AI models. So there are text language models, which is the most common ones that we have talked about. There are image generators, as well as audio and music generators. So we'll be going into depth into each one of these types of generative AI models, and we encourage you to do the same. So first, the text language models, you might have also referred to them as large language models or LLMs, have the ability to generate coherent and relevant text. They can also read and generate multiple types of coding like Java or HTML. Image generators can generate images based on specific inputs or conditions. And audio and music generation can generate musical styles and compositions based on your inputs. For each of these types, we'll be walking through the major players and their capabilities, and we're excited to see you guys and all that you guys can generate in today's session. I'll turn it back over to Leota.
Okay, before I continue, do we have any basic questions as we get started talking about these large language models? All right, I'm going to take that silence as we are just ready to jump in and explore. All right, so most people are familiar with ChatGPT. That's the one we've all heard about. We want to give you an example of not only exploring ChatGPT, but a couple of others that people are beginning to be aware of. We know ChatGPT is a big deal. The platform was launched out into the world November 30th, 2023. 2 months after its launch, some of you have probably heard the statistic, it had already reached an estimated 100 million active users. And as a comparison, it took TikTok about 9 months to reach the same amount of users. And these are active users, people who are going into it on a regular basis. So it's easy to see why many of these other large language models are getting lost in the glitter, if you will, of ChatGPT. So what we'd like to do is take a moment. If you do not have accounts, we'd like to invite you to start an account with ChatGPT. If you don't have an account, it'll be ChatGPT 3.5. And then we'd like to invite you to open and start an account with either Claude, which is our middle symbol with the AI, or Google Bard. Now, just a word to warning, if you want to play with Google Bard, you're going to have to use your personal Google account because we are restricted from using it with our UF account. So we'll give you a moment to do that. I imagine some of you already have at least a ChatGPT account and you're used to playing a little bit. So hopefully you'll enjoy our interactivity today with it.
So as Leota mentioned, with your Bard account with Google, since you cannot use your UF account, if you have your own private Gmail account, you can sign up for that in a different browser so that it does not sign you in as your UF account because that is restricted. But you can use it and play around with it at home using your home address if you have a separate account. Most of these companies, especially like Bard and what we'll show with even Microsoft Copilot, they'll allow you to go in and just ask some very simple questions and they'll might let you try it out for a little bit. But if you haven't signed up for an account for some of these, we do suggest it because it's going to be fun playing around with it today and showcasing some of that on our whiteboard.
If you guys could give us a, we'll say a thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up. A thumbs up icon. If you have 2 different LLMs opened up, that would be super. It'll give us an idea of what's going on.
Are you considering the Copilot as one of these options, or is this
Yes.
different?
Yes. And so,
oh yeah.
yeah. So as we were mentioning with Copilot, I tried in December to update my work computer to the latest version of Microsoft and the operating system that includes Microsoft Copilot, but the university is still testing that out. So I know, at least from the university standpoint, most of us are not going to have access to that until UFIT has done its finalized testing. So my assumption is we do not have a timeline on that. It could be a few months or longer. So that is something that we don't have available currently, but your home computer or other non-work computers might already have Microsoft Copilot if you've downloaded their latest operating system.
Okay.
But yes.
I was told by a colleague that one, I guess, doesn't save data compared to like ChatGPT, so that like if it especially has like student record information that you want to put in for like analyze students, let's say what they submissions. I guess that's what my colleague said, that the Bing one, the Copilot, doesn't do it publicly, I guess.
We will touch on that, but one of the things that is very important, and some of the things that we talk about in our guidelines document on this, is that for data privacy and security, you should not be putting any FERPA data, any HIPAA data, any student records, anything that's related to what you're doing in the course. So when it comes to especially grades, student names, anything with student records, that is something that any of these tools, most of these have not been vetted in that way. So you do not want to put any sort of personal or private information in there. because that's something that those systems are going to be putting obviously in their generators, but it's something that in a lot of cases that data is there, and that's something that we don't want to do, especially when it comes to student records.
Yeah, I guess I didn't mean student records. I meant like if you asked students like a exam question or something, where if you don't want, let's say, the exam question you came up with to go into ChatGPT to be saved and accessed by others. Not
You
student
can
records,
actually
obviously not
turn
for
that off.
things.
Yeah, you can turn that section off. And I think part of that is it's some of these, especially with Copilot, because Copilot integrates a lot of times with the other Microsoft products. We can do a lot of cool things in Excel and a lot of other things that you can do. So it's really important, again, that, if you're kind of playing around using it for some other things to analyze, that it's using kind of anonymized data. Because a lot of the stuff that I work with in Excel, if I need to have it write functions or make any sort of edits to, I kind of dummy the data to make sure that it's doing the same thing, but it's not running it on any student data or records.
Mhm.
Awesome question.
So,
Good question.
yeah,
Any
so
others?
if you are concerned about that and you're not sure how to turn off the recording in ChatGPT, when you have your account open, look down in the bottom left corner where your name should appear. If you click on your name, you'll see the gear icon and the word settings. Just click on settings. You'll get two options on your screen, general and data controls. You want to go to data controls, and you can see where you can turn off the chat history and training. That way it won't save it. Under general settings, you'll also see an option where you can delete all of your chats at one time if you would like to do that.
And we can show you that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions?
Just wanted to, so we can use either one of these different things. You can just pick one.
Yes, either if you want to use Claude or Bard or any of those, because what's going to be fun about today is as we're going to give you some sample prompts, what we're going to like to see on the whiteboard is what does each of those prompts provide, right? Because it's like, I'll give a great example. My son came home, and we're going to showcase it just a second. My son came home, he is in 5th grade, came home with a word problem for his math. And I was like, this is a really difficult 5th grade word problem. And so I was like, I'm like super interested to see how these other tools, and I just happen to have my computer open. So I put the question and I put it in both ChatGPT, Bard, and Claude. ChatGPT, I had it show all the work. It showed the incorrect answer, and it came up with the incorrect answer. Claude was the only one that got it correct. And it was really fascinating, again, because a lot of students, and we're going to get to that in just a minute, a lot of students take the information that comes out of these tools as gospel, right? And that's a huge problem, because like here was a simple 5th grade, well, I don't say simple because even I was struggling. It was a 5th grade, word problem, and ChatGPT 4 got it incorrect, even with showing the steps. And that was like, my son, who wouldn't know it from any other way, would have said, oh, well, that's the correct answer. And it's like, well, actually, no, like that's not wrong at all, or that's wrong if we look over here. So it's fascinating to see how it's able to come up with these different answers. So I will pass it to Leota to talk about where we're going to do now with showcasing.
Okay, actually what I'm doing right this second is I'm just throwing in the chat box a workshop opportunity if you want to do a deeper dive into prompt engineering that is offered by our very, very good friends through CITT. It's their Tech Bite workshop if you have never had a chance to join them. So just checking my spelling real quick. All right, so I am dropping that link in case that's something you want to dive into. That's their February Tech Bite workshop. Okay, so we wanted to showcase a couple of other AI tools just very quickly to make you aware of them, and then we're going to play with some prompt engineering. I've put 3 up there that you might find very useful in terms of working in your courses. One is using Pictochart, and I actually, when I generated the Pictochart that I have up here, I used it in conjunction with ChatGPT, which wasn't absolutely necessary because Pictochart is AI, it is a large language model. And it did completely generate the infographic on its own. I just didn't like the wording, so I decided to ask ChatGPT what it would put in there, and then I married the language between the two to make a stronger infographic. If you haven't heard about Beautiful AI yet, and there are other AI apps that do this, Beautiful AI will generate your presentations for you, and you can export them as PDFs or PowerPoint presentations. And of course, it allows you to edit it to make sure the content is accurate and relevant to your course. But if you're in a crunch, you're getting ready to start your class for the day and you realize you forgot to put together that really important PowerPoint because you were knee deep in grading, it can be a lifesaver. And the other one that some of you may already be familiar with is Canva. Canva's been around for a while and free to educators. But in the fall, Canva added its own AI component called Magic Studio. It has the large language model. It can generate script for you, but it can also, very similar to Beautiful AI, using Magic Design, generate PowerPoint presentations for you. So there's a couple of options there beyond working with what we're already very familiar with, like ChatGPT or Claude. Okay. Did we want to showcase any others real quick, or we want to dive into that prompt engineering?
We can dive in a little bit, and I wanted to answer Amber's question as well. So you are absolutely correct. So these tools they're not about free, right? Many of these are really trying to make sure that, you know, they're pushing you towards the paid subscription. These are companies that are trying to make money. So they're going to try and do that. And the more these AI tools, again, become even better what they do, that's what they're going to try and push you towards. So let me stop sharing real quick so I can generate a whiteboard for everyone. And so in this whiteboard, what I'd like to do is I'm going to introduce a few prompts in the chat that I would like each of you, and I'm going to put it here on the whiteboard. So if you use, whether it's ChatGPT or Claude or any of the other tools, copy this in the prompt and then add what it creates after that. Okay, so I'm just going to give you that simple prompt and let's see what these tools generate. So whatever tool you use, whatever it generates, feel free to copy and paste that answer on this particular whiteboard. So let's see what it comes up with.
Okay, since I've never actually used this, you just go to message ChatGPT
Yep.
and that's where you put it? Okay, thanks.
Love seeing all the answers.
If you could let us know when you drop that in there, which large language model you use, that would be great.
Oh, I see Copilot in here. I see ChatGPT.
Oh, there's Bard.
There we
And
go.
it should give everybody a different answer, huh? Oh, I don't.
Yeah, so all
There-
you're doing right now is just putting it in right now, just that particular prompt. And now we're gonna show. So Chelsea, you can drop it here on this particular whiteboard. So now, so you can continue adding that stuff here. So on page 2, now let's dive a little bit deeper. So now I put in a little bit more complex question for ChatGPT and the prompt to complete. So how everybody, if you go to page 2, you should be able to, again, copy and paste this prompt and then put that in Bard or Claude or ChatGPT or any others that you're going to use. And
How do you
let's see
go to
let's see
page-
what this looks like.
How do you go to page 2?
At the bottom of the whiteboard, you should see an icon that
Right
has a
down here.
1. Yeah,
Thank you.
Let me go back
Oh.
to page 2.
And in order to put something, you just go to comment, and that's
Yep,
how you.
and just add it again.
yeah.
Okay, sorry, because this is very wild with a lot of.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to figure out the whiteboard feature.
Yeah,
That's
no worries,
okay.
no worries at all.
So how
Um,
do you exactly copy the prompt, because the page keeps on, having all these entries and I seem to get,
I just put in the chat for you.
okay.
Yeah, thank you.
No
I
worries.
found that I had to scroll on the whiteboard, so the prompt was like near the bottom of the whiteboard, and
Oh.
then the copy was like all the way at the very top of my options.
No, that's weird.
I think there's just like a zooming issue.
So, yeah, there we go. Yes. So as you're kind of seeing, right, each of these tools are creating even more complex answers to the question, to the prompt. And so it's really fascinating. And I would encourage everybody here, as we're still adding stuff to the board. Our colleagues at the University of Michigan created a prompt course that anybody, whether you're internal to the University of Michigan or for us as external partners, you can actually create an account and log in and follow along with with their course. And it really is on prompt generation. And so let me share my screen. Oh, don't want to do that. Don't want to cancel that out yet. So again, as you see, the more you fine tune the prompt, the more the response is going to get specific, right? And get better answers. And this is something that you're going to see over and over again. And something that we encourage you to do is you can really go down a wonderful rabbit hole when it comes to your prompts and what you're asking it to do. So I'm going to give a couple other prompts, if you don't mind. Swapping, if you want to, you can paste an answer in the chat like Chelsea did if you don't have an area for it.
And John, can you add the next prompt to the chat?
Yes.
Thank you.
So
Yeah, I was just gonna say I could not quite figure out how to make my comment. It kept shifting back to the first page and the second page. Anyways, I've given up on doing it.
yeah, so
'Cause I
I'm not
checked,
sure
it
why
said
it's
there was an error as well.
yeah, I'm not sure why it's flowing everywhere, but we'll try this next one. So this one you don't have to put on page 3, but I want to show you even more complexity. So as a background, my background, and I did my dissertation in Stata, which is a statistical software. So I'm going to show you and give you a prompt that you can put in these tools, and I'm going to be fascinated to see and hear from everybody what they were able to find with this question. So I put the question in the chat. I'm going to create a new page with that prompt here that you guys don't necessarily have to, again, add that in here if you don't want to, but I've added the prompt here in
What's the new prompt? I'm sorry.
I put it in the chat. It's to consider the data set.
Okay, sorry. I was looking all the way in the bottom of the chat.
I think they're drinking the Kool-Aid, John.
So we'll give you another minute or so to kind of see what it comes up with. So, Muriel, that's a great point. So that was the thing is as a graduate student, I only learned SPSS and a little bit of SAS. I never used Stata, but my dissertation chair loved Stata. And so I had to do all of my analysis in Stata. And so I had to learn a new software tool. And yeah, it's pretty awesome, right? And what is fascinating, and I'll give everybody another minute. I mean, again, as you see, not only can it create all right, so what are you now doing with this? It can then provide you with the different variables. It can then provide the coding that you can input then into Stata to play around with. And then what you can do is go on a deep dive with that, as I've done many times, and correct it, right? So again, what you're seeing is a sample of the code that it can generate. And then if you want to modify the variables and the variable names based on what you have already done, you can have it do that as well, and then modify that so that, again, you're going through and making sure that that modeling is correct. Yeah, so I agree, Muriel. The coding in Stata can be a little bit more complex. And what I've also noticed in at least ChatGPT 3.5 and 4 is that oftentimes it's using coding from when it was trained from years ago. It is now a little bit more up to date, but it's still using coding that Stata doesn't really recognize again. So that's part of the correction. You have to go in and say, well, actually, this code doesn't exist anymore, right? We need to change it and modify it to this, and then have it rerun the analysis, right? So I'm going to share my screen as well. So this can get even more complex. So can everybody see my screen? So you can also have it interpret the results. So you can throw in the results, and then it's going to give you the model description, the fixed effects, the random effects, the model fit, log, everything. Okay. Now, this is scary to me right? Where as an instructor, if you're going, okay, so I'm asking students to go in and create this specific model. I need it to run on this type of analysis. I need Cronbach's alpha. I need this fixed effects, blah, blah, blah. You know, these tools now have the advanced capabilities to do these things. Okay, so it's no longer, again, just like, oh, let me go on a prompt and, okay, I really need to study up on what a fixed effects model is, what a random effects model is. This can then interpret any sort of the output. So that's, again, these models are only getting stronger and stronger and better. So again, it's really important that what we're talking about when you're going to be attending the upcoming sessions with assessments, that you begin to then look at what it's generating and what the output is. Because again, if you take the output as canonical, as true, then that can be a problem when that information is inaccurate. And Swapna, this is something me and Leota have talked about for, I don't know, the last few weeks, is that we've actually ended up liking Claude a little bit better. And the results, like I mentioned with my son's math problem, is that we've actually seen that it's given more accurate information than what we've seen out of ChatGPT. So that's something that we've also found like super, super fascinating. So again, you can use Claude, Copilot, and Bard are again, some of the most common ones. And as I mentioned and put in the chat also, that our wonderful colleagues at the University of Michigan have created a course that you can sign up for called the Generative AI Prompt Literacy. And what's great about it is down here, it actually talks about some of the best practices. So some of the things we talked about today, where again, when you give it a very general comment or a very general thing like, okay, well, what's the Roman Empire about? What is this? And then you can then further refine that and say, all right, so what are the economic factors that happen during the reign of Claudius? And then, so again, you can go on, and I love it, because, you know, again, you can go on deep dives with some of these tools. And to me, I find it fascinating because you can kind of just play around with it and see what it's capable of and what the output is. And again, we'll get to more of that as we move into these other sessions. But if you haven't, the University of Michigan, again, you can just create an account. You don't have to be a University of Michigan attendee. Okay. Are there any other questions? Anybody have any other thoughts or ideas that you guys saw from these outputs that you guys had questions on? I'll leave it up for just a minute as we await.
I guess I had a question on
Yeah, go ahead.
your thoughts. I feel like I'm sure, we've all considered some of the ethical, implications of using these tools. And this is my first real foray into using this, so this is exciting for me. But in addition to your concern about, accurate output, I guess going back to what you were saying about, being able to interpret information, just even that alone, don't we kind of run the risk of individuals maybe not, maybe not feeling like they have to do that as much if they're able to rely on these tools for interpreting information and making assessments on their own? And how do we navigate that?
100%. So that's towards the later part of the presentation, but that is something that we're going to go over, which is, again, biases that are in these tools, the ethical considerations, and some of the things that we need to do as faculty, and some of the things that we can help you out with when it comes to AI literacy. And that is something that is going to be incredibly important over these next few years as these tools begin to become even more commonplace. Who else? Questions based on what we've seen so far?
I have a question. So I saw somebody also posted on the chat. So mentioned that if it's possible that UF will provide like membership for the faculties to access to these wonderful AI tools. since that there's a lot of tool that you need to pay for it? Thank you.
Yes, that is a great question. And some of you might have seen, and I'll ask Jen if she can go back in our kind of CTE AI unit chat. So I posted a link to a Chronicle of Higher Education article that came out, I think on, what was it, Monday? That showed the partnership that ASU had with OpenAI. And so what we're seeing is that some institutions are partnering with these other organizations, these other AI companies, as part of that, and are providing subscription level services free of charge to faculty and staff. In some cases, it's not at the student level, but it's mostly at the faculty and staff level. I don't know where the University of Florida is in that way, or if we are even looking into doing that. It's something that, again, when we get to the later part here, when it comes to accessibility and availability, right, is that what we're seeing is if you're able to use the paid subscription models, and if you are, as a student, are able to pay for those things, you kind of have a leg up on students who do not have that capability, right? Where, if you're having it help craft presentations, if you're making different pictures and other images like we're about to showcase in just a minute, that's important, right? That is a flaw in the system where, if you have the availability to use these tools and these technologies and everybody else does not, what is the equitable access to that we're starting to see? Yeah, so there's another great question in the chat. If we encourage the students to use AI for the assignments, any tool for us to check or grade their work? Okay. This is an even broader question. I thank you for that, because Leota and I are on this when it comes to academic integrity, right? Which is that question related to AI that we saw a few minutes ago. So it's really, really important that we understand that right now there's not really a tool that can check that anything that's generated out of this is generated by an artificial intelligence system. Okay, there are many programs and there's many software companies that are out there that say, oh yes, well, ours do this with X% of accuracy, but that's not 100%, right? And that's a huge problem that we're facing right now, where there has been some institutions, you've seen them in the news, that have flagged certain students and their responses as AI generated, and it turned out to be inaccurate. And so then if you take those students to honor court, if you try and do anything like that, then that is a liability, right? So we really have to understand the context here, that there really is no silver bullet to checking that the prompts and whatever is generated afterwards was done by AI versus a student. Okay, so that is something to keep in mind when we're talking about assessments, and something that I know Jen and some of the other CTE folks, when we talk about authentic assessments, how we can try as best we can as faculty to prevent the use of AI in the classroom. So I hope that kind of helps a little bit with that. Any other questions? Yes.
I'm sorry, I can't get the raise hand thing to work.
Okay.
Let's say you give an assignment to a class, and it could be a small class, but each one of them has to write some sort of treatise on how economic factors contributed to the fall of the Roman Empire. Let's say that all or some use an AI generated answer. Can you then not check it for plagiarism with Turnitin? Because I imagine that thing would light up like crazy if they're all using similar AIs.
No, so Turnitin.com, at least from what we've seen so far, has touted that there is some way that they can potentially, again, I'm not going to use legal here, but that they potentially can see or flag things as AI generated. But they themselves have said that it's not, again, 100% accurate.
Mhm.
So while you can have the students submit this information into Turnitin, as you see in any of these tools, you can just regenerate the response, right? You can regenerate it 1,000 times and have it change it as a language. You can have it use it in the voice of Taylor Swift if you wanted to, like write this you know, write this prompt or write this answer in the voice of Taylor Swift, or write this in the prompt of Edward Gibbon, who wrote The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire, right? So that's something that we have to keep in mind, that these tools, because it's trained on, again, 175 billion parameters, it's trained on these massive, massive data sets, that it can generate things that are in different voices and different contexts, that there really is, again, no silver bullet to finding out if the response that they generate is from an AI tool or not.
I'm just gonna piggyback on that with a couple of things from my experience in the K through 12 education world. So let's say your students are generating, and they probably are, to be very honest, they are probably generating assignments through ChatGPT, Claude, Google Bard. There are other apps that they can feed those into that will paraphrase it to make it even harder to detect whether or not they wrote it, or ChatGPT wrote it, or Claude, or whoever, or they took it from another student. So there are other apps to help them get around that, unfortunately. The other issue with the with using the AI detector is there is research that is demonstrating that the AI detectors are biased against our English language learners because of the style in which they're writing in English. And so we have to be very, very careful about that as well. Just wanted to throw a couple of thoughts out there with the AI detector. And of course, as an instructor, and this is something that when I was in the classroom last year, working with other AP teachers in the high school setting, as soon as ChatGPT released, we were all getting our accounts set up and starting to work with it and realizing how it was going to turn things on its head for us in the classroom. So the follow-up question is, well, if they can use it, what's next? You know, do we make it punitive? Do we retailor our assignments? How does this affect going forward into college? So the same questions you're having right now were questions we were asking when ChatGPT came out. Another thought is with ChatGPT and how strong, if you will, that might not be the right adjective, these large language models are. When ChatGPT came out on November 30th, it had a knowledge base going back to about 1970, as far as the information they had fed into it. In December last year, so December 2023, it was already up to 2020, 2021, and that's the free version. And it's just as they're continuing to feed information and it's continuing to learn based on patterns, it's just going to get harder and harder to tell the difference between what is human generated and what is being generated by ChatGPT. And so if I were in the classroom right now, I would be having multiple conversations with students about responsible use to try to tackle it from that perspective, if that helps. I don't know if that helps because you guys are coming from a diverse disciplines, and the requirements for your subject areas are certainly quite different for each of you. It's just a thought.
Awesome. So Dr. Ostroff, just real quick, if you're down here, you should see this prompt area here.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you can enter in any of your prompts, and that's what will allow you to ask it a question. The same thing like with Claude, it's right here. Bard, Copilot, same thing. Just there's usually an Ask Me Anything or an area. So if you need to create a new chat, you can create a new chat, and it should look like this. All right, awesome. So now let's go to all right. So let's go to some major players when it comes to image generation. So hopefully we're doing pretty good on time. So there are 3 major players right now that most folks are aware of. So the first is Midjourney. And it's a major player in image generating that can create some highly realistic artistic and conceptual images. Now, of course, this is a paid subscription. There is, of course, ChatGPT's DALL-E, which is included in the paid subscription ChatGPT 4. And then Adobe Firefly, which everybody here should have access to as a UF staff and faculty. So let's look at some things. So I would like you guys in the chat to comment. So this is number 1, this one here on the left, and this one here on the right is number 2. So which of these, number 1 or number 2, is AI generated, 1 or 2? So is number 1 AI generated, or is number 2? So just put it in the chat which one you think is AI generated. Okay. Well, both actually are AI generated, both of these pictures, right? And so Laura has a good thing. They both kind of have that look, right? But it's becoming even more difficult to see. So let's go to number 2. All right, so which one of these is AI generated? The first one or second one? So 1 or 2? So similarly, both of these are AI generated. So Muriel has the correct answer. So if you look, and so I'm putting the actual prompt from Midjourney into the chat. And so what we'll start to see is, again, as you tell it to be more and more complex, that's what it's going to provide. So here is another one. I'll put the actual prompt that generated this image in the chat. So you'll see here that the more you add detail to the prompt, the better tendency the result is going to be. And so as you can see, some of these images are incredible that it can generate, right? And commonly what you'll see, as Muriel points out, that a lot of, even though these look like real people, and a lot of the earlier AI image generators, they looked really weird and they're all like, you know, shaded out and faced out. What's weird is that you're going to start to see that there's just little pieces about, you know, the oboe kind of actually in their mouth, right? Or that the this thing here is outside of their face, right? So you're going to start to see more and more that a lot of these, yes, the hands is another thing that AI has been very difficult in showing. So it's really fascinating to see. So like this one, I actually did the image generator and I asked it to create a mosque from the Safavid dynasty with worshipers outside, right? And so I made it a little bit more complex, but that's what it generates, right? And you can even create it with specific styles. So you can say, hey, I want this in Impressionist. And so this is, again, when it comes to copyright, it's becoming even more problematic, is that you can then have it change based on the artistic style to say, I want this in the Impressionist style, or hey, I want this in the Dada style, right? So you can do that and it'll regenerate based on that information. So again, it's really cool where, again, if you wanted to create a PowerPoint presentation and say, hey, I'm doing my presentation on DNA, this is something that it can generate and you can use as a background image. So I found that I love that kind of stuff. So let me do.
Is it possible to see this happen in real time? Are we going to do it now in real time?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yes.
And you'll also have the opportunity, there is a workshop in the series digging into image generation with AI.
All right, so I'm going to go here to ChatGPT. I'm going to DALL-E. So if you want to, again, you can go to ChatGPT and you can put in, so I'm going to put in a prompt and I'll put this prompt in the chat for everyone, that says a realistic illustration of a frog's life cycle showing eggs, tadpole, tadpole legs, adult frogs, right? And then I'll show, this is another one as a prompt that I put in that you guys can put into Adobe Firefly. So if you do not already, you can go to the Adobe Firefly website. And as we talked about, Bing also has a free image generator. So this Firefly with your, you should be able to log in with your license to do something similar. So here's what it comes up with, right? So from tadpole to frog. So now I'm going to put in prompt 2, and let's see what it generates. And then this is what that same prompt looks like. And again, you can choose from the multiple options, but I'm going to show you, let's see what ChatGPT comes up with too. A lot of times what you're going to see is that when you ask it for illustrations, you're going to see a whole lot of Greek language and a whole lot of basic nonsense on the side that of when it labels anything. Almost all things that I've ever done when I've asked it to, and even if you've labeled, so let me see if this will work this time too. So I'm going to ask it showing the Earth's crust and all major components. Let's see what it generates. And let's see what ChatGPT did for this one. Okay. So same thing, as you see here, water is misspelled, absorption, everything's misspelled, carbon dioxide. So it might have the actual image itself, the icon being correct that you want, and the cycle being correct, but all of the actual labels are incorrect. So this is something that we see consistently, and here's, it created something similar to mine last time. And again, all the labels, if you ever zoom in on any of these things, are inaccurate, right? It's dribble. And that's something that, again, we see consistently whenever we ask it to do any sort of infographic or image. And thanks, Jen, for noting that. So for DALL-E 3 in ChatGPT, you need the ChatGPT 4 plan. But with Adobe and with Bard, there is some samples that you can do for image generation. So again, they can do those things. And something that I should have saved this morning when I was, me and Leota were playing around with it. I asked it to do an infographic of a generative AI model. And the entire image was of cats and a bunch of tech stuff around it. And it was like, why are there kittens in this image? And it was just everywhere throughout the image. And it was just like, what? This doesn't make any sense. Why are cats in this, in the created image? So you're going to see a lot of times that, especially at least right now, even if I told it, so I've done this before where I tell it, regenerate this image and use these words. And I give it in quotes and tell it to spell it this exact way, and it will not do it. Okay. So that's something that, again, we're starting to see over and over again. So here's Bing's general creator. So that's something. So let's see if it will. Oh, I already have one. Now it's going to ask me to sign in. But yeah, so I can do that too. Thanks, Mike, for putting that in. All right. Now, let me turn it back over to my colleague, Leota. So are there any questions on whether it's Midjourney, ChatGPT, or Adobe Firefly? If you want to, Midjourney, if you're interested, has a showcase. And it showcases some of the things that people have generated along with the actual prompt that they use. And, you know, again, some of the stuff you see looks incredibly realistic. And Midjourney, because it is a paid subscription model, it is a little bit more powerful when it comes to what it generates. And it's really fascinating, again, if you want to go on a deep dive. So Swapna, can students also use Bing like we can? Yes.
Do they have any of these things where you can see it actually more like a video, not just a static photo?
You mean,
Where they
oh,
all
so
add it?
so
You know,
can,
Yes.
like if you want to show a picture of a brain and neural connections being sent from one area to another, can you see
so
stuff like
images, no, but there are some tools that are out there right now. So I'll give you an example. So everybody, I don't know if you haven't, Apple and Meta both have those VR goggles, right? The new ones that are coming out on February 2nd, if memory serves, so the Apple ones. But what they've seen is they created a video where it shows every part or every component of the actual lenses and goggles itself, right? So it's able to show just for, you know, a 10 or 30-second clip, all the different components or parts of that. And so, yes, you can ask these tools to generate like, hey, give me every component of a heart, because we're using dissection. And that's something that some of these tools can do. Again, the accuracy and how it's going to generate, it's been a mess, at least as far as what we've seen of what we see. And yeah, so Chris points out using it to look at surgical images. It is hilarious, right? It's so like when me and Leota were messing around this morning when it did those things that would generate AI and was showing cats. It's like, where is this coming from? Like how this is so wildly inaccurate. So yeah, that it's fascinating. But again, imagine the parameters it's already built on with 175 billion. Imagine what this is going to look like in a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years from now. So if Midjourney, right, can create these realistic images, what is this going to look like? And I, again, find it hilarious of some of the things that they create. So what is this going to look like in a few years where they're going to be able to have that kind of capability? So yes, I agree. It is incredibly fascinating to show students, again, you cannot trust what you are putting in or what the output is. And that's whether it's an image or the output that it generates in text. Because if you're trusting that, we've already seen and can show based on the prompts that we're giving them that it's going to give you inaccurate information. And that is something that they are trusting it. And that's one of the things we talked about earlier about how do we know if they're using a AI tool? Well, you know, a lot of you guys are the content experts. You know, when you see the response going, what? Like, this is so wildly off, or like, this isn't the voice I recognize when you're typing in your usual papers or handing in your papers. Who is this? Like, I don't recognize this voice and this person who's generating this. So yeah, that's another thing that's super fascinating. Are there any other questions about image generation? Maria? Oh, you were unmuted, sorry. Any questions?
One more question. Can you actually just post it? Like if you were, let's say you found something that you could use on a recruitment flyer or something. Can you use it, or do they have like some rights?
So right now, because there is no copyright to my knowledge when it comes to what it's doing. And that's the concern, right? Is because, so a lot of you guys might know Jeff Koons, who's famous for those balloon art pieces. Well, you can type that in here and say, hey, give me this thing in Jeff Koons' style, and it will generate that. And so using something like that is clearly a copyright issue because you're literally just copying his work and transposing it on something that you're creating, right? But what I showed here, right, this isn't really copyrighted because this is something that the tool is generating itself. Does that make sense? So like, I like to use these as backgrounds of your PowerPoints and things like that, but yes.
So I'm just gonna add to that real quick. So there's actually a Supreme Court ruling on this particular issue. The Supreme Court ruled in the fall, and I'm sorry, I don't remember the exact date, but it made the news big time. That if it is not human generated, it cannot be copyrighted. That copyright is only for human generated items. But then that creates other issues, and we've seen articles in newspapers and journals where artists are starting to fight back. For instance, again, in the fall, Amazon was caught using generative AI to write and publish books under authors' names that they had not written, but they were able to use ChatGPT to mimic the voice of the writers. And so the authors have fought back, and I know Amazon had to remove the books from their offerings. Visual artists are also starting to fight back in terms of their artwork because of the power of things like DALL-E and Midjourney, and recording artists. And I'll talk about that in a minute, but Dr. McGill has her hand up, so I want to make sure we answer the question.
Oh, thank you. This may be thinking forward a bit too much, but when you were showing those infographic, mess ups, I was curious if there's anything that exists right now where it would give you like an Illustrator file or something that has layers to it so that you could go in and, fix the text so that the picture itself is usable, but, the things you need to fix text-wise or whatever little details like that, is that out there yet, or that's in the pipeline, or I was just curious?
I would make an assumption that since Firefly is an Adobe product, that is certainly something that they are putting in the works as far as what the output is. I believe, Adrian, did you have a question too? You had your hand raised a minute ago.
I figured it out. I just
Okay.
need to play around for a minute. Thank you.
No worries. Mariel? I'm sorry, we can't hear you. No, it's very, very low. Would you mind either getting closer to the mic or putting your question in the chat and we can see if we can address it?
Is this better?
Um,
I'll put it in the chat. That's fine.
Okay, perfect.
We'll look for it in the chat.
Yeah.
While you're typing that in, let me just talk very briefly about music and audio, because I know we're starting to run short of time. So, I mean, if we watch TV, if we watch the movies, we are aware that AI has been out there for a little bit. People talk about deepfakes all the time now, especially in thriller movies and whatnot. So I just threw out a couple of AI options in terms of music and audio. We have a highly rated music platform. It does have limited free use. And we can drop that link in the chat for a minute if you want to go explore it, but people can use it to generate songs, to generate music. When I took a look at the platform, I have to tell you, it was a little bit repetitive, but maybe I'm picky about my music. More so than the younger crowd these days. Speechify was interesting though, because I could see an accessibility usage for Speechify. The scary part of that is that even in the limited use free plan, it uses human-like voices to read to you. And so we're going to share something with you. We're not going to take the time to watch it. I'm going to drop the link for this TED Talk video in here, but it's a musician who's created her own AI app, if you will, for generating music. So if you want to get an idea of how scary this is, well, I don't want to use scary, how intriguing this is. I encourage you to take the 10 minutes to listen to it. The thinking here is, especially with watching this video, and we've already talked about copyright concerns, with, again, the responsible use of AI, yes, your students can generate things and pass it off as their own. We're starting to see stories where people are doing nefarious things with generative AI. Back in November, TikTok influencer used a generative AI audio, music app, wrote a song, and was able to dub Drake's voice over it, release it as a Drake recording. His studio picked it up and tried to release it before they all realized that he did not actually write or publish that song. So it can get quite interesting. But instead of focusing on the negatives, we want to try to remember there are practical applications to these apps in our classroom. And so we need to think about, again, that responsible use. Like I said, Speechify is an interesting idea in terms of accessibility for students who need text read to them. For instance, if you guys have played around with Immersive Reader, as the online course quality specialist with CTE, I do listen when I'm checking for accessibility in online courses. I do listen to Immersive Reader, and that robot voice, whew. But when you use something like Speechify and it has that human inflection, it just sounds much more natural. So I could see some positive uses there for that. So I am just taking a look at the questions. Oh, there's Muriel's question or a comment. Oh, look, we were thinking the same thing, accessibility. Great minds, right? Okay, we are almost done. And I know we only have a short amount of time, so I'm just going to encourage you to take a look at that TED Talk. I'll drop the link in just a moment in the chat, if that's something that you think you'll be interested in watching. What's happening when we're talking in faculty through our FLCs like Harnessing AI or Teaching with AI in the SEC is we're finding that instructors are really falling into three camps at this point. Essentially, we have a camp that instructors are not allowing the use of AI in completion of coursework. They usually have a very clear policy statement in their syllabus warning learners about the consequences of academic integrity violations with the use of artificial intelligence in the coursework. Because of course, if you don't have that and you don't want them to use AI, you don't have much leg to stand on, so to speak, when it comes to, I don't want to say confronting, redirecting students away from using that. The second camp are where I think most of us are at, cautiously exploring how AI might be implemented. We're experimenting, we're talking to students about the value of AI usage, perhaps even working together in conjunction with them with certain assignments to showcase the strengths and weaknesses so they have a better understanding of it. And then that third camp are the people that have wholeheartedly embraced AI in their instructional practice. They're using it to write their objectives. They're using it to create their slideshows. They're asking their students, they're intentionally inviting them with their guidance to create assignments or polish assignments or brainstorm for assignments, maybe even having students collaborate together in terms of how AI can be used with the coursework. But they're also, again, they have that clear policy statement in the syllabus, marking those boundaries and talking and teaching them the methods for avoiding plagiarism in their work. I'm going to turn it over to John.
Yeah, so now it's where do we go from here? And as Leota mentioned, we kind of really have three options that we see a lot of faculty members go with. So the first is that option A in the syllabus, it's encouraged. Option B, that we need to distinguish again between original work and work generated by AI. And the last is that it generates, any AI work that's generated constitutes misconduct. So that's something that we talk about specifically. Oops, going backwards. So some of the ethical considerations are that there is bias. We need to talk to students about that the way these are trained and what they're trained on is that there can be bias in these outputs. Source transparency, clearly communicate to students when and how AI is being used. Explain its capabilities and limitations as we showed today. Data privacy and security, ensure FERPA, especially for us and for students, make sure they're not putting in any sort of personal information in these AI tools. Accuracy, again, as we showcased today, we need to validate the outputs and correct the errors. And especially it comes to providing education, ethics, and literacy to foster a responsible version of AI. And so we're going to put some of these options in the chat when it comes to syllabi. I'm going to put 2 of them in the chat and showcase them. So this website here has a bunch of universities that put in and has courses you can look at as well as their policies. And of course, our wonderful colleagues at the University of Michigan have some sample syllabi language you can use for examples down here. It's permitted with certain activities, etc. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And lastly, we want to talk about what we can provide as well. So again, if you haven't signed up for the other 3 sessions, feel free to do so. The link is in the chat. So we also offer a ton of great resources. We offer the UF Instructor Guide. We have a whole lot of resources on a resource library. We have the UF faculty for adding AI to your course. So let me put that in the chat as well. So if you have any questions, feel free to go to our website at teach.ufl.edu, and we're more than happy to connect with you. So if you go here, you can go and schedule a consultation with any and all of us. So again, you can go to our teaching consultations page and do a Microsoft Bookings with us to set up a one-on-one with us. And we'll be more than happy to meet with you and talk to you more about this. So I know we're running really short on time. So if you have any questions or comments, feel free to add that in the chat. We'll spend a few minutes afterwards to wait. If you have any questions or concerns, we can do that. But again, we wanted to thank you, me and Leota and my colleagues, Jen and Mike. So again, thank you for being here. If you have any questions, feel free to let us know.
It would help if I unmuted, right? We have an exit poll that I'm going to launch right now. If you wouldn't mind, just 3 questions for us. I would appreciate it. Hopefully you can see it. And then somebody asked, I'm on the iPad. I can't really save the chat file. I believe Jen, don't we get a recording of the chat file?
You're gonna get the recording and I did save the chat. We can definitely email that to
Okay.
you.
Yeah, so just send one of us an email and we can get that to you. And if you are having trouble tracking the links, again, just send